Snow fell softly through the open doors of St. Catherine's Church, drifting like whispered prayers into the quiet sanctuary. Jonathan Hayes, a 35-year-old man with sharp eyes and a sharper mind, sat alone in a back pew, his broad shoulders slouched under the weight of a life that glittered but never glowed. As CEO of Hayes Industries, he commanded boardrooms, orchestrated deals worth millions, and lived in a world where success was measured in dollars and influence. Yet, no amount of wealth could fill the hollow space left by a marriage that had crumbled years ago or the children he'd never had the chance to love. The church, with its ancient wooden pews and the faint scent of candle wax, was his refuge, a place where the chaos of his life paused, if only for an hour. On this chilly weekday afternoon, the sanctuary was nearly empty, save for a few scattered souls seeking their own moments of peace. Colored light streamed through the stained glass windows, painting the stone floor in patterns of crimson, sapphire, and gold, as if the heavens themselves were reaching down to offer solace. Jonathan closed his eyes, letting the stillness wrap around him like a forgotten melody. A soft rustle broke his thoughts. Near the front of the church, a small figure moved with purpose, a little girl, no more than 4, her red velvet dress a vivid splash against the muted tones of the sanctuary. Her blonde curls bounced as she stepped from pew to pew, her tiny shoes tapping lightly on the floor. She seemed to be searching, her movements a mix of determination and quiet desperation. Jonathan watched, curiosity stirring, as she approached each person in the sparse congregation, speaking in a voice too soft for him to hear before moving on to the next. There was something in her persistence that tugged at him, a spark of courage that belied her small frame. His chest tightened with an unfamiliar instinct, protective and raw, as if her quiet quest had already woven itself into his heart. When the girl reached his pew, she stopped, her eyes meeting his with a clarity that stole his breath. They were wide, blue, and impossibly wise, holding a sadness that seemed too heavy for such a young soul. "Excuse me, mister," she said, her voice polite but threaded with a quiet ache. "Are you here by yourself, too?" The question pierced Jonathan, simple yet profound, like a stone dropped into still water. He nodded, his throat tight. "Yes, I am. What about you, sweetheart? Where's your family?" Without hesitation, she climbed onto the pew beside him, settling her small body next to his with the effortless trust only a child could offer. Her dress rustled as she smoothed it down, her hands careful and deliberate. "I don't have a family like other kids," she said, her tone matter-of-fact but laced with a longing that made Jonathan's heart clench. "I live at the children's home with Miss Margaret, but she's sick today, so I came here by myself." Jonathan's gaze softened as he looked at her, this tiny girl who had walked alone to a church seeking something she couldn't name. Admiration and concern tangled within him. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked gently. "I'm Grace," she replied, her fingers still smoothing her dress as if it were a sacred ritual. "Miss Margaret says I should always look nice when I come to God's house." A smile tugged at Jonathan's lips. "Grace is a beautiful name. I'm Jonathan. Can I ask why you came here today?" Her expression grew serious, her small brow furrowing as she considered his question. "I come to talk to God about getting a family. The other kids at the home have people who visit them or might adopt them, but nobody ever comes for me." The words landed like a blow, her quiet honesty cracking something open in Jonathan's chest. He understood loneliness, the kind that lingered like a shadow no success could banish. To hear it echoed in this child's voice was almost too much to bear. "Grace," he said softly, "I'm sure there are people who would love to have you as part of their family." She shook her head, her curls swaying with the motion, her eyes reflecting a truth she'd already accepted. "Miss Margaret says I'm too old now. People want babies, not big kids like me. But I keep praying that God will send me a papa who needs a little girl as much as I need a family." Jonathan's breath caught, her words stirring a hope he hadn't dared to feel in years. This child, with her unwavering faith and fearless heart, was reaching for something he'd long buried. "Grace, what would you say to a papa if God sent you one?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned to face him fully, her small hands reaching for his, her touch warm and trusting. I'd tell him I know how to be good, and I can be quiet when he needs to work, and I know how to make him happy when he's sad. Tears pricked Jonathan's eyes, her sincerity alight in the darkness he'd carried for so long. Those are wonderful things to offer, Grace, he said, his voice thick. She studied him, her gaze intense, as if weighing a decision that could change everything. Mr. Jonathan, do you have a little girl at home? He shook his head, the truth heavy on his tongue. No, Grace. I don't have any children. Her eyes brightened, a spark of hope so vivid it was almost painful to witness. Do you think maybe God sent you here today so I could find you? The question hung between them, fragile and electric. Jonathan's heart pounded, the weight of her words sinking in. Grace, what do you mean? She slipped off the pew and stood before him, her small hands still clutching his, her voice steady despite the enormity of what she was about to ask. Mr. Jonathan, I don't have a papa, and you don't have a little girl. Maybe we're supposed to take care of each other. She paused, her small chest rising as she gathered her courage. Mr. Jonathan, can you be my daddy forever? I promise I'll be the best daughter in the whole world. Tears streamed down Jonathan's face, unbidden and unstoppable, as he looked into the eyes of this brave child who offered him her heart with nothing but faith to guide her. Grace, he said, kneeling to meet her gaze, that's the most beautiful offer anyone's ever made me. His voice trembled, but he pressed on. Being a daddy is a big responsibility. Are you sure you want someone like me? She nodded fiercely, her curls bouncing. I'm sure. I've been praying for a papa with kind eyes and a gentle voice, and you have both. Her certainty was a lifeline, pulling him toward a future he hadn't dared to imagine. In that moment, in the quiet of St. Catherine's Church, with snow falling softly outside, Jonathan felt the pieces of his broken life begin to mend. 3 months later, the same church buzzed with life. Pews overflowed with friends, colleagues, and staff from the children's home, all gathered to witness an extraordinary moment. Jonathan and Grace stood together, their hands clasped, as Pastor Williams spoke of miracles born from unexpected meetings. Grace showed us that families are forged not just by birth, but by the courage to ask for love and the wisdom to recognize it, he said, his voice warm with conviction. Jonathan slipped a small ring onto Grace's finger, a symbol of their unbreakable bond, while she placed a matching band on his, a promise of forever. The congregation erupted in applause, their cheers mingling with the soft strains of organ music. At the reception, Grace climbed onto a chair, her red velvet dress as bright as ever, and addressed the crowd with a confidence that belied her age. Thank you for coming to my adoption party, she said, her voice ringing with joy. I prayed every day for God to send me a daddy, and he sent me the best one in the whole world. Now, Mr. Jonathan is my papa forever and ever. Jonathan lifted her into his arms, marveling at how this tiny girl had rewritten his story, turning a life of loneliness into one of purpose and love. 2 years later, in the garden of their new home, Grace's 6th birthday party was in full swing. Laughter filled the air as children darted through the grass, their voices blending with the hum of celebration. Jonathan watched his daughter, now thriving in school and surrounded by friends, as she ran to him with a crayon drawing clutched in her hands. Daddy, I made this for you, she said, holding up a picture of 2 stick figures holding hands in a church, snow falling around them, colored lights streaming through windows. It's us, from the day we found each other. Jonathan's heart swelled as he traced the lines of her drawing. Grace, do you remember what you were thinking that day when you asked me to be your daddy? She looked up at him, her gaze as direct as it had been that snowy afternoon. I was thinking you looked lonely like me, and maybe lonely people are supposed to help each other not be lonely anymore. Her words, simple yet profound, echoed the truth that had transformed them both. Jonathan hugged her close, knowing she was right. The lonely CEO and the orphaned girl had been destined to find each other, not through boardrooms or business plans, but through a child's fearless question and a man's willingness to say yes. Their story, born in the quiet of a snow-dusted church, was a testament to the power of love to heal and rebuild. As Jonathan held his daughter, he thought of the journey they'd shared, a journey now celebrated on their YouTube channel, MidnightTales, where they shared their story of hope and connection with the world. In that sacred moment, with Grace's laughter ringing in his ears and the warmth of her small hand in his, Jonathan knew that the greatest success wasn't found in wealth or power, but in the family they'd built, one brave question at a time.